Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, wait for a second. Sophie needs something. Can't hear you.
Kyle, do you have a presentation to share screen with?
Yes.
Okay, how do I do that? I'm learning, I'm sorry.
Should I click my share screen?
I don't know that we're there yet.
It's all right.
I'm
You
sorry.
gotta get to that little.
Okay, can you see it okay? Yes? Okay. So the presentation is meant to follow the same order as the draft ordinance. It just helps, I think, to point out some of the things and provide some visuals. Can everyone see the pointer, the red dot on the screen? Okay, good. I was hoping that would work. All right, so this is something that we discussed previously when we were meeting last. This kind of comprehensive downtown MDR zoning amendment that had a few different parts to it. There are really three parts to it. The first of which is the Village Residential Overlay District, which is the one piece of this that we discussed in some detail before we stopped having meetings for a bit. So there's just one slide on that just to give a little recap and refresher as to how that fits in with the other two that we're going to talk more about. Second, what Megan mentioned is the conditional use village commercial transitional district. And then the final thing, which I believe was the next item on the agenda, was the medium density residential district lot size reduction. So just touching on the village residential overlay district, this was an idea that was in the comprehensive plan. We spoke about it a few times previously, and the idea of this overlay district was to create a completely optional but incentive-based district. This is blocking what I can see. It applies to MDR lots, medium density residential lots within walking distance of the downtown. So we're going to be talking about a few different types of zoning districts throughout this presentation. An overlay district is something that sort of sits on top of the existing zoning district. So the village residential overlay is an option for lots in the medium density residential district. So if someone doesn't want to take part in the overlay, they don't have to, and they can continue to abide by the existing MDR standards. But the whole point of this was to promote the opportunity for smaller, more affordable lots, so long as there was a condition in place that at least one of the units on the property was owner occupied. And the goal was to promote young family housing, to bring in new owner occupants and to establish some of that more affordable housing for these younger families to come into Orono. Like I said, we spoke about that in some depth previously. So moving on to the new piece here is the village commercial, what I call transitional district. Obviously, the name is, it can change, it can be whatever we want to call it. But the whole idea is to expand the village commercial on a conditional basis. So if you look at the map, this is Main Street over here, and then Mill Street. Right now, the village commercial ends at Pleasant Street. So the idea behind this would be to extend the village commercial down to the end of Mill Street, where it turns into Water Street, for those lots fronting on Mill Street. And the way that the ordinance would do this is through conditional zoning. So this section here wouldn't be the same as the village commercial here. It would be kind of a hybrid area between the village commercial and the MDR. So it would allow some of the things that are allowed in the village commercial that aren't allowed in the MDR. It would allow certain commercial uses, smaller scale commercial uses, whereas the MDR doesn't allow any commercial uses. But it wouldn't allow some of the more intensive commercial uses that are allowed in the village commercial, like gas stations or auto repair or banks or certain things like that that you wouldn't want as you got more into a residential feel. So what is a conditional zoning district? You can kind of think of it like, we've done contract zones. Conditional zoning is pretty much the same thing as a contract zone, except it's initiated by the town instead of by an applicant. So in this case, it doesn't apply to just one lot, it applies to an area or corridor. But the principle is the same. It allows you to take a base zoning district, in this case, the village commercial, and use that as kind of the base for the area. But then on top of that, you apply certain conditions to get the sort of desired effect of the area that you're interested in. So in this case, it allows for some more commercial activity, more mixed use activity, but the conditions and performance standards that you put in place prevent it from turning into as commercially impactful of a district as our existing village commercial. So why expand the village commercial? Well, first is kind of establishing the difference between mixed use zoning districts and single use zoning districts. So the village commercial is a mixed use district. Although it has commercial in the name, it's not just a commercial district. The village commercial allows all types of residential uses, from single family, two family, detached, single family, attached, multifamily, but it also allows a number of commercial businesses, whereas the medium density residential district is more of a single use district. It's meant pretty much entirely for residential uses. Both types of districts, not speaking about these two, just in general, single use versus mixed use, they both serve their purposes. Single use zoning became pretty popular when we were trying to protect people from being next to factories and other sort of nuisances. It made sense to separate where people live from where a lot of work takes place. But there are also some downsides to single use zoning. If you have your residential over here and your commercial over here, it can oftentimes create a very auto-centric atmosphere. So one thing that mixed use zoning is good for is promoting walkability, because you're combining residential and the businesses and the services all into one area. Better walkability promotes a lot of good things that the comprehensive plan supports and the town has supported in the past.
Let me try to check which mic you're using. Oops. You might have to stop the share momentarily so you can get out of the full screen.
Well, it should be good too.
We're just trying to correct his audio because it's really garbled at times.
Go to meeting controls. Yeah. This one. Might have to stop the share. Yeah. Do a test.
Okay, is this any better? Worse? Better? Okay. Try that. All right. So back to this, like I was saying, so walkability can promote obviously a healthier population, less traffic and pollution on the roadways with vehicles, and more on-street community engagement. You have people walking, you know, in closer proximity to each other, which might not be great now, but usually that's a thing that communities like to promote. So there's a lot of benefits that come along with mixed-use zoning when you can limit those commercial or industrial type uses that would otherwise negatively impact the area. But really what sparked this whole idea was the last point here, is that mixed use offers more options and more flexibility for existing property owners as well as potentially new property owners. So in the couple years that I've been here, and I know the several years before that, it seems there's been this incremental expansion of the village commercial district where someone would come forward with either an existing home business or something that they wanted to do and requested in some way that the village commercial be expanded. And it led to all these individual cases of, okay, we'll expand the village commercial by one lot here and by a few lots on Forest and a few lots on Main Street. And so this is really aimed at looking at the key area of where it would be best suited to expand the village commercial in a more preemptive manner and kind of doing it all up front instead of periodically going through that process of either a contract zone or a town initiated zoning change every time something new comes up. But as we've discussed in the past with other projects, any potential zoning change has to be supported by the comprehensive plan. So these are some of the things that I pulled out that kind of go to support an idea like this. So first, housing in and near the downtown, encouraging mixed uses, including residences in and adjacent to downtown. So like I said, the village commercial isn't just a commercial district. It allows for a wider variety and a more dense environment than the medium density residential allows for. The minimum lot size right now in the MDR is 20,000 square feet. In the village commercial, it's 2,000 square feet. The MDR allows single family and two family housing. The village commercial allows both of those, but multifamily as well. So there's just more flexibility and potential for infill development, new dwelling units going into existing structures, if you were to switch to the village commercial in this area. Second, the comp plan mentions directing a majority of future growth into in-town areas near infrastructure and services. So again, the second point there really speaks towards infill development. Letting the low density and agriculture districts beyond the interstate remain less developed and focus development on the areas where we already have a lot of investment. So, there's public transportation options, there's Black Bear Express and the Bax route, there's businesses, there's sidewalks, it's closer to emergency services. There's already, roads and houses built in this area. So allowing new development to take place in that environment can prove to be a smarter growth option for the town. Third, identifying whether any properties at the edges of the existing village commercial district should be rezoned to be included. So this is sort of what I was talking about before, where, from time to time, we look at, a couple properties here and there, whether it would be smart to include those in the village commercial, whereas this is sort of taking it a more preemptive approach and looking at what makes sense more all at once ahead of time. And last was revising the land use ordinance's existing one-size-fits-all off-street parking requirements for new residential development to better reflect demand based on number of bedrooms. So this is something that I've put into the performance standards for this conditional zoning district, and it could prove to serve as a kind of experiment or test as to whether something like this would work and be beneficial for other areas of town as well. So next slide is kind of showing you the existing use on this corridor. I think it's useful to see that this area, although it's in the medium density residential district, is not just owner-occupied single-family homes. So about the image on the right, all the colored blocks show each of those lots is a rental as of our latest rental registration information. So about a third of the lots on the corridor are rental properties or have a rental unit in them. There are also several commercial uses along the corridor. The buyer manufacturing lot, is a grandfathered use, and you can see that's the biggest lot on the corridor. Also, down here we have 117 Mill Street, which we recently did a contract zone for. They also have commercial uses on the first floor there. So the point is that this area is already not really completely residential. It already doesn't fit in with the medium density residential description. It's already mixed use to a certain extent. So if you look at the lot sizes of the 20 or so lots in this area, as I mentioned before, minimum lot size in the MDR district is 20,000 square feet if you have access to public water and sewer. Well, 16 of the lots here are less than or equal to a quarter of an acre, which means they're under 11,000 square feet. And 9 of the lots, almost half the lots that we're talking about in this area, are at or under 6,500 square feet. So the lots here really don't fit the dimensional feel that the MDR kind of describes. The 2,000, 2,500 square foot minimum lot area that the Village Commercial has is probably more representative of the feel of this corridor than the 20,000 square foot minimum lot size that the MDR has. So just showing that the built environment in this area really probably fits closer to the Village Commercial than the MDR. So this is just kind of an aerial view looking from Water Street out towards the Village Commercial. So that's Main Street up there at the top. Everything above the red line up here is Village Commercial. Below is the MDR, and in the yellow box is what we're talking about changing to this conditional Village Commercial district. So the point of this slide was to show kind of the general structures and the lot coverage and the density in the two areas. So you can see up top by the parking lot that that's the most developed area. It's almost entirely impervious cover. It's all buildings and pavement. But there's areas around that on Oak Street and this little section of Mill Street there that looks pretty similar to what's down here. So this is really just showing that there's not much difference in the lot coverage and density and feel of the on the street feel between existing parts of the Village Commercial and the area we're talking about here. It's not like we're going from very close, very developed area to an area that is completely different. It's very similar in a lot of ways. So this is, just kind of a more on the street view, Oak Street. This is existing village commercial. So a lot of people, they stand on Mill Street next to the shops and the parking lot. It's easy to see that, yes, that's the downtown commercial district, but this is right next to that, also in the village commercial. And I mean, you can see it's, there's small setbacks, things are close to the street, but they look primarily like residential homes, but it's still the village commercial. So, I mean, at any moment, one of these homes could be turned into an office or a retail store if they wanted to, or they could have a dwelling unit with an office on the first floor, something like that. Same kind of thing. This is from Pleasant Street, looking up Mill Street, just showing the similar kind of feel that, you don't see a lot of shops necessarily, but it's still considered to be the village commercial. And it provides these houses here with the option of having those types of small businesses located within them. So then this is the view, down Mill Street past Pleasant, that we would be looking to potentially turn into this conditional village commercial district. Here's the fire manufacturing building on the left. So you can see the houses are still fairly close to the street. There's a roadway big enough for two-way traffic. There's a sidewalk on one side that provides easy access from the end of Mill Street all the way up to the parking lot. It's less than a 5-minute walk. So just showing that the built environment on the ground isn't much different. So some of the performance standards included in the draft ordinance language were basically aimed at keeping the commercial uses that would potentially go in at a smaller scale. A lot of it was based off similar language that we have in the Stillwater Avenue Overlay District. The only one that was different from that was the first one that talked about reduced parking minimums. Obviously, if you're talking about changing this to a mixed-use district and promoting walkability and more public transit use, and you want people living in a denser environment next to businesses, and you have a public parking lot not too far away, and we've talked in general before about some of our parking requirements being perhaps a little higher than they should. It made sense for this area, especially, to kind of have a reduction in that parking requirements rather than having the 3-space requirement for every new dwelling unit, reducing that like the comp plan recommended to more of a per bedroom basis where, if you're talking about having a studio or a 1-bedroom dwelling unit only needing 1 parking space required. And if you have, 2 or more bedrooms, then requiring 2 parking spaces, something along those lines. Parking minimums in general are something that a lot of communities are looking to get rid of. Getting rid of parking minimums doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't going to be parking. A lot of communities and planning theory seems to agree that developers are capable of gauging the necessary demand for parking, and that by requiring certain amount of parking, you're kind of assuming how people want to live in a certain area, especially in a downtown environment where it is possible to walk and use a bus more or bike. By requiring something like 3 parking spaces for every unit, and someone might want to move into a studio apartment just by themselves, and they might not even own a car or need to own a car, but you've already required that unit to have 3 parking spaces because of it. This adds unnecessary impervious cover to the area, especially in this area where you have the shoreland zone because of the river not too far away. It adds unnecessary cost to the developer because they're building parking that they don't really need to if people aren't going to necessarily need to use it. And it decreases walkability because you're just building more area that can't be used for either residential or commercial uses. So some other performance standards that could go into place here, having a max total floor area for non-residential uses. So if there was some concern about this area turning too much into a commercial feel, this is something that exists in our ordinance for the Stillwater Avenue Overlay District, having a 2,500 square foot max floor area for non-residential uses. So if someone wanted to put in a retail store or a restaurant, it could only be that size. So you're not allowing, someone to come in and buy a lot and knock down the house and create some massive commercial use that's going to generate, more traffic than you might want coming into that part of the area.
Kyle, can I just stop you for just a momento?
Sure.
About parking on Mill Street? And I don't know, maybe this will change, and this is my question, I guess, will this change? There's parking is like, so from Omeland, Margarita's up, parking is timed, right? Like you can only be there for 2 hours or whatever, and then they start ticketing. And then I think that goes down to about, what is it, Harcourt? What is the name of the development that's down there for elderly people?
Yeah, so I think the spaces go down to Pleasant, where the Village Commercial.
To Pleasant. And then on that side of Mill Street, there's no charge for parking. Like you can park there all day long without any ticket or penalty. Will that change when this new zoning goes into effect?
So I haven't considered that as part of
Okay.
this. This is more of a general thing, but I imagine traffic flow, parking, traffic calming measures, if something like this went into place, all of that would have to be looked at, and that would be a conversation with various departments and staff.
Okay, thank you, Kyle.
Do you have anything else? So the last one here was more of a visual aesthetic standard, and it deals with preventing that completely commercial feel and still maintaining that more of a mixed use feel where the residential uses that were there didn't necessarily feel out of place. So if you were putting a business in, you would have to, and you wanted to add some parking maybe, it would have to be located to the side or rear of the building. This is similar to standards we created when we were amending the ordinance for Park Street, where you want to have that more walkable, neighborly feel on the street when you're walking, and you don't want to see parking lots in front of the structures, and not having any outdoor storage or display of goods for the businesses. So, all part of the commercial use would really have to take place within the, within the structures on the lot. So that was it for the village commercial kind of conditional use transitional section. The only other thing that I didn't really touch on that's in the draft language is the actual land use table that proposes which uses would be allowed. That was on page 6 of the, I guess starts on page 5 and goes to page 6 of the draft language. And that simply allows, it would aim to allow all of the different residential uses that are allowed in the village commercial, and only some of the commercial uses that are allowed in the village commercial. So things like barber shops, child care centers. You notice I put a footnote there that it it follows the same guidelines as the existing village commercial district follows. Commercial schools, some of these can be discussed. This wasn't necessarily, it has to be all of these. These were just the initial ones that I thought to bring up. Medical office buildings, offices, restaurants, retail and service businesses, And that was pretty much it. There's a lot of, other commercial uses that seem like they, bring in more traffic and potentially more vehicle traffic that could potentially really alter the feel of some of those, the street as you get further down Mill Street. So it was more aimed at allowing commercial uses that could be used more through walking and biking, and you don't necessarily need to drive to and park it. So yeah, that was it for that section. So I don't know if we wanted to take a break and have any questions before jumping into the next section.
Kyle, I actually do have just a couple questions to kind of like keep in mind when you were talking about kind of minimizing the impact on not saying you're going to set a certain amount of parking spots. I live in this area, but I'm okay with understanding how this is supposed to, how it evolves and stuff like that. But my only concern with not having minimum or something, whatever it may look like, is does it become a space where the residents in the area who obviously live here, there's vehicles parking up next to their houses on the, kind of congesting the street. And I just want to look at, because I think that sometimes there are certain places that businesses go in and there's a lot of traffic and people are trying to find a parking spot. So I'm not really sure how to address that, but I just want to kind of put it out there for the residents that live around me, the impact on them.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I think it's an important concern and something, just traffic in general would be something I would want to discuss with some other staff about, to see if they feel that the existing infrastructure can handle that and what problems would be created, and if there are traffic calming measures that can be taken to kind of reduce the harmful impacts of any additional traffic that went in. So the businesses in this area would hopefully utilize the existing parking areas that are already downtown, as it's fairly close still. So even if there wasn't on-street parking or a town parking lot right there, it's only a couple minutes away, so they would still be able to utilize that space. And as far as required residential parking, they would still be required some parking per unit. But in looking at other towns, parking requirements, a lot of towns have that kind of 2-space minimum parking requirement. It's really rare to see 3 parking spaces required for every dwelling unit, regardless of size. So the parking reduction was really aimed at taking our probably excessive parking requirements and reducing it down to not nothing, but something that was took more into account what was actually happening on the property. So if you were creating a 2-family home where you had 2 or 3, maybe 4 people living in that structure total, you didn't need to have 6 parking spaces on your lot, and assume that every single person was going to drive. Maybe you would only need 2 or 3 parking spaces. But it really being up to the property owner to say, well, we want to have this many units, and we know that, we want to advertise this as a place where people can bring a vehicle and can have a vehicle. So, we want to add more beyond the minimum. I mean, that would be fine if they chose to do that. But yeah, it's really just meant at not forcing parking requirements in situations where it's not needed. But yeah, I think there are certainly potential issues that could arise, and we'll probably have to explore all of that further.
Great, thank you for the detail.
Does anyone else have any other questions about either of these sections or want to get into any of the smaller details? I do have one, but if anyone else. No. Kyle, I was wondering if you could just briefly walk folks through the section on subdivisions, just because those things can get a little, just in the details, get a little hairy, and I think maybe folks out there might be interested to hear about that. And I was also, just as I was reading that section, thinking, where in this area could subdivisions even go? But that, we don't have to talk about that, but just very, very briefly, sort of the performance standards involved in the subdivision section.
So are you talking about in the village residential overlay section?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if I have a map here. Yeah, so in the village residential overlay, let me pull it up. So the idea with the overlay is different from what we were talking about. There's some extra kind of things that go into effect. So that affects a different area beyond the village commercial. It would affect, as we've discussed previously, some of the existing smaller neighborhoods, Webster neighborhood, down Main Street along, I think, to Island Ave, like that kind of area. So there aren't too many lots probably where big subdivisions could take place. There aren't a ton of completely undeveloped large parcels in that area, but there are a couple. But with any subdivision that wanted to take advantage of the overlay district, they would have to have a deed restriction that every single lot that met those reduced lot size standards, every single one of those lots would have to be deed restricted to be owner occupied. So if you wanted to have that 7,500 square foot lot in a subdivision, it would be required to be owner occupied. And the goal with that was really to say, we have some lots like this in the MDR already. There are some established neighborhoods with that kind of size and feel to them already. So if you want to create new neighborhoods with that same feel, that's fine, but it needs to be geared towards home ownership. And so those more affordable lots are used to attract families and owner occupants rather than new rental housing. The density isn't just taken advantage of for the purposes of student housing or any large scale multifamily housing. And multifamily wouldn't really be allowed in that district or in that overlay anyway. So it would just be a matter of small single family or potentially two family lots. So even though the lots may be fairly smaller than what is currently allowed in the MDR, it would still have a very residential feel to it, where the houses might be closer together and on less land, but it would be still that single use residential type feel to it, like I was talking about before. So I know some of the standards that were in there have to do with connectivity. A lot of the existing streets off of Main Street and just elsewhere in town are dead end streets that, subdivisions were created, and it ends with a cul-de-sac. And, something I think that's important is providing connectivity. It makes it easier for access and traffic flow through a neighborhood. It makes it easier for certain services like plowing and emergency access. Utilities become easier and more efficient. So one of the standards is to kind of lay out any potential subdivision that took advantage of that incentive in more of a connected kind of rectangular shape, to make sure that we weren't creating any more of these dead-end subdivisions. Is there anything else that you were curious at, or is that?
No, thank you. I wanted to make sure that you got a chance to explain those details, because I think sometimes if people hear the word subdivision, they get nervous. So,
Sure.
so I think that was probably really helpful for folks to be able to understand what it is that we're talking about in this particular
Right.
documents. Does anyone else have any questions either about the residential or the transitional piece before we talk about the MDR? All right, take it away, Kyle.
Okay, so the third piece to this kind of rezoning amendment is also something recommended in the comprehensive plan, and it is just a medium density residential district wide reduction to the minimum lot size. This is specifically to lots in the MDR that have access to public water and sewer. So the minimum lot size for those lots right now is 20,000 square feet. This change would reduce it to 15,000 square feet. So it's not, it's the overlay district that we were just talking about. It talks about allowing for 7,500 square foot lots. So I'm not talking about going that small, or, it's still a fairly substantial lot at 15,000 square feet. You still maintain that very single family residential feel, but it does do a lot of things and have room to create some difference in the district. So I did a little digging on data for our existing MDR district. There are roughly 1,100 lots in our MDR right now. So like I said, the minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet, except our median MDR lot size is a little under 17,000 square feet. So our median lot size is non-conforming to what is in our ordinance. If you look at all the lots, about 600 lots in the MDR have a lot area less than 20,000 square feet. So over half of the lots in the district are considered legally non-conforming, which means they're grandfathered in, basically. They're allowed to continue to exist as they are. They can do certain things, but they are a type of non-conforming lot. It doesn't match the dimensional requirements laid out in our ordinance. So, why adjust this minimum lot size? So I think a lot of people talk about, they talk positively about certain neighborhoods in the town that don't match our current dimensional standards for the district. People like these neighborhoods. They think they have a great community feel to them. They think they have a great character. So if that's the case, then it would make sense to match our ordinance more to what's actually on the ground. If people in general like, these neighborhoods where these legally non-conforming lots already exist. Adjusting, that slight reduction of 20,000 to 15,000 square feet also allows for a slightly smaller lot creation in subdivisions or just dividing a lot in general, but still keeps that single or two family feel to it. So if you have a piece of land, that's a few acres, let's say 60,000 square feet, currently you could turn that into 3 lots, whereas if you change to the 15,000 square foot minimum lot size, that's 4 lots now. So you can, maybe you do 2 two-family homes instead of a single family home and a 2-family home. So there's a small room for more development without, completely altering the feel of these existing neighborhoods. It also would allow single-family homes between 30,000 and 39,999 square feet to convert to 2-family homes. And this seems oddly specific, probably, but there have been times where people have called looking to do things like this, and they can't because they have, just small enough lot size where they don't have enough lot area to become a 2-family home. And that's a unit that they could rent out, provide housing opportunity for someone else. They could supplement their income. They could do all sorts of things, all while still maintaining, a residential feel. It's not like you're turning single-family homes into multifamily homes and bringing in loads of people to neighborhoods that wouldn't otherwise be there. So to visualize this, this slide is 3 images. This one on the left here shows the entire MDR, and then these two focus in on a couple, smaller close-up neighborhood shots. So if you can see, out of all these MDR lots, the blues are the ones that are over 20,000 square feet. So you can see it's a lot of really big parcels kind of that back up onto the interstate that aren't really going to be developed. They have wetlands going through them or whatever. But if you kind of focus in on the different neighborhoods, this one at the bottom here is right around the Village Commercial. So you have Webster and the area behind the Village Commercial. Up here you have the Sailor neighborhood. You can see that there's a lot of red and green, and the red is lots under 15,000 square feet, and the green is lots between 15 and 20,000 square feet. So it just really shows that most of our existing, residential neighborhoods are prime areas for housing, are just non-conforming and don't match what our ordinance is showing. And this was just a view of a couple of these neighborhoods. So College Heights on the left, 9 lots between 13,000 and 20,000 square feet. So all those lots at the bottom there would be considered legally non-conforming. But you can see it's a very single-family residential feel. Same with on the right here, Sunset Drive. Pretty much all of the lots on the right side of the street there, fairly big homes, probably mostly single family. They're all on, roughly the 14,000 square foot lot size. So I think it's important for people to understand that reducing the minimum lot size here from 20,000 to 15,000 isn't really changing what's on the ground. It's not aiming to increase the density to create an environment that doesn't already exist. It's more matching our ordinance to the neighborhood feel that already exists in certain parts of town, in most parts of town, in the MDR district. And then in the draft ordinance language, I provided just an example that Brewer, in their MDR district, which serves primarily the same purpose as ours, they have, split it into an MDR1 and an MDR2. They have a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet in one district and 7,000 square feet, I believe, in the other district. So this sort of mirrors that in the way that reducing the MDR as a whole to 15,000 square feet, and then giving the option as you get closer to downtown with the village residential overlay, with the 7,500 square foot lot size. It allows to sort of shift to a denser environment, allowing for more infill development to take advantage of our existing infrastructure and services, all while not creating opportunity to negatively impact our existing neighborhoods or change the feel so that people feel like their community is really changing for the worse around them. It's meant to maintain that feel, but let additional people take advantage of that same feel and those same benefits. So that's all I had. Again, if there are any questions, happy to answer.
Do folks have any questions? for
I'm
Kyle?
actually, I have a question. There are a number of lots in the MDR that have water, town water, but not sewer. And I'm assuming that those lots would not qualify for this. They have to have both. Is that correct, Kyle?
Correct. So the minimum lot size for lots that have one or the other is 30,000 square feet. And the minimum lot size for lots that have neither public water or sewer is 40,000 square feet. And those would remain unaffected by this. This would only reduce the lot size for lots with both town water and sewer.
Good. That's what I was hoping.
That's the recommendation as it was in the comp plan was like that.
Thank you.
So it seems like
Your mic is off, Megan.
and so from what I'm hearing, it seems like one of our tasks in terms of next steps is to talk about sort of where that radius is, right? So if the overlay is functionally going to perform like the MDR1, MDR2 example in Brewer, we're sort of trying to figure out now, I guess, as a next step, what is going to be in the overlay and then what is going to be in the reduced lot size MDR. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. So these sort of this is why I really wanted to kind of do this in one piece, because they all impact each other. If, where the village commercial transitional ends is where the village residential overlay begins, and where that ends. And the MDR reduction to 15,000 affects the whole MDR. So even if the overlay is above that part, if someone doesn't want to take part in the overlay, they would still be able to take advantage of the 15,000 square foot minimum lot size. So, but yeah, they do all play off of each other. So once it's established that sort of all three in general are ideas that would, are worth pursuing, then yeah, I think it could be easier to work out the specific boundaries.
So I have a comment, which is first, thank you for the presentation, and I'm so pleased to see this moving forward. Government takes a long time to make things happen because we need to be careful about evaluating what that moving forward would do. So I appreciate your work, and I will say what I've said in previous times where this is presented, which is I encourage us to go lower. As it often happens, I'm a lone voice or something, and we don't do it, but I would say that it's clear from the neighborhoods that you presented that those neighborhoods were built before this was part of our ordinance, so that we would not have a neighborhood that had houses all with 14,000 square foot lots if we had had a zoning that said the minimum lot size is 20,000. And you showed that more than half of the lots in the area you're talking about have less than 20,000. And even Brewer, you also presented that even Brewer has come up with two different levels of density, the 7,000 and the 15,000. And I would advocate that we should either follow their lead and have two, which I'm sorry that makes a lot more work for you, but the last time I said I thought that lots should be lower, I didn't think about making two. I just said I thought 15 was still high, considering there are so many neighborhoods people already choose, and they don't ever say that, oh, that neighborhood I wouldn't go there because the lots are too small. So there's plenty of neighborhoods where the lots are 13,000 square feet or 14,000 square feet, and so and for example, my lot is 5,000 square feet, and in my neighborhood the lots are much smaller than 15. And so I would advocate that we make it smaller because that helps us reach those goals of more housing in the part of town that already has water and sewer, to increase density, increase tax base, increase walkability, and that you've done so much work to get us to this point that only dropping to 15,000 isn't realizing all of the good that could be done by changing the lot size.
I mean, it seems like this cascading approach, though, that we've just been talking about addresses that specifically. So if you think of the transitional district as like the nexus of the smaller requirements, we decide if we were to also adopt the residential overlay. That's a slightly larger but still very small, relatively small lot size. And then extending out further away from the village center is the reducing from 20,000 to 15,000. So what you're talking about is, slightly expanded lot sizes as you get away from the walkable center of town, which I think addresses those issues. I mean, that's my understanding of what Kyle's presented anyway.
Right, and what I just said is I would like that when you get to that part where he's proposing it be 15, I would like to see us go to a even smaller lot size than 15.
Kyle, we've talked about this in committee many times. Was there a reason I think I'm vaguely remembering, there was a reason why we couldn't go lower than 15? Did it have to do with access? Was there something that, because it's been a long time now?
No, I don't think we discussed specific to this one. The reason that it's written as 15,000 square feet is because that's what the comprehensive plan recommended at the time. If different numbers wanted, I think we talked about it with the village residential overlay district, why the 7,500 square feet and 5,000 square feet were chosen. And that was the same reason, is that's how it was identified in the comp plan. And there was some level of community outreach already done during that process that kind of established some of those numbers. But certainly the numbers can be adjusted. I think the important part at the beginning was to just get the proper kind of idea and feel of what each piece was meant to do and its purpose. If, there's some desire to look at, what different numbers would look like on the ground, or, what sorts of problems, if any, arise from, other lot sizes. That's something that can be explored.
I thought that we had talked about access to the road, like there was something about getting into the actual divided lot itself, that there was something going on in that.
That might have been.
Forgive me, because it's been a long time.
Yeah.
I was thinking
Yeah,
it
I
had
also
to
don't.
do with access or driveways or something, but I don't know that for sure.
That might have been more in regards to a frontage requirement versus the actual lot size requirement. And the MDR, the reduction, it's not just lot size. It does reduce the frontage requirement from, I believe, 100 to 80 feet as well. So there is some reduction there. But yeah, if you're starting to talk about reducing frontage requirements, how much of the property actually has to be on the road, then yeah, as you lower that further and further, it might create potential access issues.
I have a question. It's all great and good to talk about these numbers and that sort of thing. And if we do, go along with Councilor Osher's idea of making them even more smaller micro lots, how does that work? We can change it, but we're not going to just wipe the slate clean and then rebuild the neighborhoods to meet, this new thing, right?
Well, actually, it's not micro would be what I have, which is 5,000 square feet. So that's what they're saying now are comfortably sized lots that are larger than most of the lots in town.
Sam, was there?
Well, but it's so how does this, my question is, how does this work? If we do this, is this like you buy a property, you destroy it, and you make two properties? Or, we have a town.
Yeah. So my guess is that certain lots are situated differently. There are corner lots where there are houses, the lot is on two streets. The house, is more fronted on one of those streets. something like that is a situation where if there was proper lot size, you could probably divide that lot and build a house fronting on the other street.
I remember the graphic you
Cases-
had with Google that you
Oh,
created.
sorry, what was that?
I remember the graphic you
Yeah.
did with Google. You did a great job with that. So there, and if I'm trying to bring back all the pieces of this conversation from months ago. But so there are limited lots that this would actually impact, where this would be even a possibility.
Right. So, like any lot, so with the MDR reduction, for instance, if you were on 25,000 square foot lot right now, and you had a single family home there, reducing the lot size from 20,000 to 15,000 square feet doesn't really do much to change anything. You still don't have enough lot size to add a second dwelling unit. But right now in the MDR, you need 40,000 square feet to create a 2-family home because you need 20,000 square feet per dwelling unit. So if you were on a lot in the MDR, like you might not want to build a new house on your lot. You might not want to divide your lot off and sell that so someone can build a new home. But you could have a large single family home on a 32,000 square foot lot, and you don't use part of your home and you want to create a 600 square foot second unit in your home that you can rent out for some income. It would apply to situations like that, where people could use, it would basically be like our accessory dwelling unit, the same purpose as that, except not having quite as many restrictions in place as that ordinance has.
Great, thank you.
I'll just say that for me, the fact that we would be, well, 2 factors. The first is that the comprehensive plan recommending 15,000 in addition to the fact that, that is the median lot size or close to the median lot size that already sort of is naturally occurring in this district. Plus the fact that we have the option to look closely at where we set the radius of a potential village commercial residential overlay makes me feel very comfortable about council's ability to really look neighborhood by neighborhood or area by area about where we think these lot size changes would be beneficial and not potentially harmful to any existing neighborhoods or lots. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with this approach, and because we do have so much control over where that radius extends, and we can really look closely at those properties and what would be doing the best for that particular area of town. I mean, that's just me. I don't know if other folks want to weigh in.
So, I don't have the slide, but when you talked about you said that the median, that half of 600 properties were below 20,000 square feet on that first slide.
Correct.
Out of 1,100 properties.
Yep.
So, so that would mean that but you didn't tell us what the median lot size was for all of our properties. And even with that, you showed us that there's so many properties that are very, very large. So it appears to me that it'd be interesting to find out how many properties are below 15,000 square feet and below 10,000 square feet. Because when I advocate for lower, it's based on the fact that you told us that these developments that we have 13 and 14,000 square feet as standard. And those are developments that when people drive down them, they don't ever think of them as cramped. They think of them as reaching the ideal of single family home living in Orono.
It's on page 9 of our materials, Lori. The MDR median lot size is just 16,988 square feet. I don't know if it was on one of the slides or not, but it's in the package.
Yes, but he showed us that there was many, many, many large lots, or there, so that's those very large lots skew how many. So we don't have how many lots are below 15. Or below 10, and anyway, whatever. I'm still, I know that the comprehensive plan, people thought a lot about this, and I think that, and I've been attending Growth Smart Maine and Build Maine conferences, and the focus is to try to get more walkable towns, to get more units, more units in the areas that have the water and the sewer, because it increases the amount of tax base that you have, and the more people who can live and use the schools. And so that comprehensive plan was worked on very hard by people in our town, and they've had this discussion and came up with 15, but we're many years forward. And so that I'm still advocating that I'd love the number to be lower. I can't pull a number out of the air because I haven't done the research to find out what would be more representative of what we already have. But from what he presented, 13 or 14 would certainly be more representative than what we have, than 15. And every 100 square feet would make a difference to those people who would want the opportunity to subdivide, because let's say they own a property that's 2,600 square feet, and then they could make it a duplex. So that would make it, and I don't know how many units, how many properties that would make a difference to, but that in these tough economic times, that is an opportunity for our residents.
Lori, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just know that Tom wanted to speak. Terry hasn't had a chance, and I know some folks have expressed. I just want to make sure we hear from everybody.
I actually agreed with your comments earlier, Megan. I certainly give the recommendation of the comprehensive plan a lot of credence. I'm not sure that 15 is the magic number, or 14 or 13, but certainly in my perspective, 5,000 is not the magic number. I think that'd be much too small a lot for us to support. And we're also going to get, as we move forward with these proposed changes, we're going to get feedback from the planning board. We're going to have public hearings. I'm not sure we have to agonize too much over this lot size right now, because we're going to be able to get some feedback from the public.
Meg, Tom, that was exactly what I was thinking, is that I think where we're going to right now currently is a great spot. There's a lot of lives involved in here. There's gonna be a lot of feedback. And yeah, I'm kind of in the same kind of mindset as you, Tom. So that's where I'm at.
And ultimately, the property owner is going to have the choice of whether they want to divide or right. So, I'm kind of in that boat too. I think we should kind of wait and hear what the public has to say.
But Kyle, I know you were looking for feedback about the sort of the three-pronged approach that you put together today. And so I think, do you feel like you have what you need on that front, or?
Yeah, it seems like, what I'm hearing is, in general, the ideas are there and people seem comfortable with how they work together. Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily important to hammer down exact specifics of the boundaries or the numbers, the dimensional requirements. Obviously, something like this, where it affects kind of neighborhoods, just like we did with the Park Street standards, we'd probably have some series of public informational sessions, probably reaching out to different groups at different times to talk about how the specific pieces of this would affect them individually. So I think that process would probably offer a lot of feedback and something to work with.
All right, then, unless there's anything else, we will move on to item number 4, which is a brief town manager's report.
Thank you, Kyle.
Yes, thank you, Kyle.
I have to say, I enjoyed a few days of sort of vacation. We decided that working at home when you can wear shorts and a paint splattered t-shirt is vacation. It feels awesome to do that. So thank you very much for that time. So I don't have a lot to report other than to tell you that I am working with staff. I spent most of the day today looking at some COVID-19 planning. We are fortunate to have 3 different grant opportunities, but with grants come a lot of work to administer them appropriately. We are we continue to work daily with the university to understand their plan for bringing people back. I think our next step is going to be to reach out to some of the larger landlords to understand how they plan to address the potential of having students back, off-campus students. So we're starting that planning process now. And we are evaluating, kind of creating an if-then roadmap for staff. So if these things are happening in the community, then here is how we will kind of tackle it on staff, what we can expect to see. And I think a couple of things that we will expect to see is rolling in some more formal daily survey through the time card process of employees, so that they'll be checking that they're not sick. Make them take a moment to think about how they feel before they check in the morning. I think you'll also, I think we had some folks working to try to open things up more. I'm not inclined to do that at this point. I'm not getting complaints that we're unable to meet people's needs doing it with closed buildings and by appointment. So I want to continue in this vein for a little bit longer. Everything that I'm seeing says that it is a way to help keep staff safer and the community a little bit safer. So we're going to continue on at least through probably the end of August is the plan, so that we see what's going to happen when students come back. I don't know if anybody, I know Tom reads the New York Times because every once in a while he'll send me clips from it. But Evan actually sent me a really nice clip talking about the particular risks that college towns are facing with regard to COVID-19 when students come back. And I think the university is doing a lot of planning, and Rob St. Louis, as our public health officer, has a seat at that table. So 3 days a week, he's up on campus talking about how to plan for students coming back. But it's probably too Pollyanna-ish to think that we're going to welcome a huge cadre of students back and not bring some COVID-19 with us. And so I think we really need to be thinking now, how are we going to address that? Down to what happens when my staff gets sick or they have to quarantine and I don't have anybody at WPCF to take tests. How are we going to maneuver that? So that's the kind of planning that we're stepping into now, which is, it's good. It's just sometimes getting staff in that mindset when what they want to do right now is go out and do their job and get things done. Planning isn't as fun. But outside of that, I've enjoyed some vacation and getting ready for it will be a wonderful Monday evening council meeting. Quick.
Sophie, there was Governor Mills' executive order that's kind of given municipalities the right to enforce mask wearing. Is that something that we're comfortable with or should be doing? Or, I mean, as a town, as a council, I know I'm responsible for myself, but I don't like going into businesses where they don't, where they're not enforcing it. But
yeah, so let me tell you where I'm at, because council might want to do something totally different, and ultimately it would be a council choice. I think with all the rest of the conversation that's happening, I really don't want to get into an enforcement role unless there is a true public health emergency or issue. So for example, going into restaurants to enforce mask wearing is not something I really want my staff to do. Walking around with a ruler to make sure that people are 6 feet apart is not something I really want my staff to do. if we roll up in Webster Park and there is one heck of a party happening with 250 of your closest friends, Cheryl, we probably want to stop and do some education. So the conversation I had with my staff earlier today was around the fact that thus far we have not taken a punitive approach with anything regarding the pandemic. I don't want to change that approach. I want to try to educate and convince people to do the right thing and to keep people safe. We got the Healthy Maine grant funding, and part of that funding we had to talk about how we were going to promote or enforce social distancing and face coverings. And we were very clear that we wanted to educate, that we are not taking any money to enforce social distancing. It's all about education.
We are educating by example too, correct? Like
Absolutely.
They're with these masks, and they're using them when they're interacting and leading by example, correct?
Yes. Yeah, and we've had significant conversation here, Sam, about the fact that it's really not about anybody's personal opinions or what they want to do in the privacy of their own homes or on their off time. It is about what we as a municipal entity are responsible for. And we really are responsible to be community leaders, everybody that works here. That said, we also know that there is a pretty high likelihood that we're going to end up in a world where, at least here, we're going to be wearing masks if you're even outside of your office. All the research and everything that we're reading is telling us that to require that before it actually needs to happen will cause people to become complacent and not do it when it really needs to happen. So we are still in the world here of, if you can maintain 6 feet of social distance, which is the governor's order, you don't have to have a mask. If you're in an enclosed space like a vehicle, you do. If you're there with other people, not by yourself. By yourself, you're fine. And we've got 6 feet of plexiglass between us and the rest of the world, and more than 6 feet from desks. So in order to help with some of that social distancing, we're having to flip the offices at Town Hall around a little bit. So for example, if you were looking for finance, after tomorrow, you will find finance upstairs in what used to be the voter reg room. The voter reg room is now your executive session conference room is now Bell's old office. Bell has moved, and so we're moving people around to try to ensure that we've got 6 feet of separation in every office between people. So yeah, I think that's a long-winded way to say yes, Sam.
And I know people want to leave, and not to belabor this, but I've been asked about our contract with the university. I know you're talking to them with the after school rad camps and things like that. Have you heard any news at all of?
So we don't have, I mean, after school we've got some programming. We fall under the same camp dynamic as everybody else. And for as long as the fitness center is closed to the rest of the public, it's closed to us. And so I will say, while it's not, you won't see folks here because they're not allowed to be here, they are providing an awful lot of support, guidance, help as we are trying to roll out other programming.
Okay, thanks, Sophie.
You are welcome.
Sophie, I just wanted to one of the last thing before everybody goes. So I have to say that I commend you for really taking this and navigating it. It's kind of like when I actually went up to the county and there was signs up there about impeaching mills, and it really hurt me because I thought, what an amazing and tough job this is. And it's no different in the world of of local government. And I look at our employees in the local government here as part of like our world. I have employees also, and I would hate to know that one of your staff members or anybody within there have been hurt because we didn't make the right decision on following whatever guidance there is. So I think you're doing an amazing job, and I will stand behind you and your staff all the time, because their safety for me is the utmost thing, I guess, and that we can actually make sure that we can get our stuff done. We'll get it done. It's still a little different, but we'll get there. So thank you.
Well said, Terry. I agree. Absolutely.
I think one of the things that would be important, though, is if we are missing the mark and people aren't getting things, in order to change, we have to know. Because if I can stay in a sweet spot where I think everybody's needs are getting met, I'm going to stay here for a while. But if we find out that there is really a line of people that we are not serving, I need to know that so that we can get creative and try something different.
For the record, there are some of those impeach mill signs here in Bangor too. Just saying, it's not just the county. Good gracious.
Thank you, Terry, for that as well. Yeah, a lot of times this conversation about how to stay safe revolves around the user, like the college student or the person who comes to a business. A lot of times the conversation is not about the people who work in these capacities. So I'm very glad that that we're really thinking of our staff.
Yeah.
Sophie, is there anything else in your update? Okay, well then, oh, yes.
Just wanted to double check with Cheryl that I'm going to meet her in her Zoom room right after this.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
The Zoom room.
The Zoom room.
This is where we live now, in the Zoom room. Okay, so I'll take a motion.
So move.
Second.
Everyone in favor of exiting this Zoom room?
Yeah.
See you Monday.
See you all on Monday.
That was relatively painless.